Aristotle, 2,000 years ago or more, tells us, 2,450 years ago, quote, so is it naturally with the male and the female. The one is superior, the other inferior. The one governs, the other is governed. It was all very self-evident to Aristotle. Holy Scripture, the Bible, is wonderful if you're looking for quotes on this. It reveals that God is not only a male, but a male supremacist. Genesis 3:16, thy desire shall be to thy husband. But I suffer not, no, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man. Now, it's a very interesting thing that if that's your natural place, it's very interesting. It's your natural place. It's the natural order. It's very congruent and confluent. Yet they're always telling you, just stay there. Don't you try to get out of line. And I mean, why are you so worried about it, Timothy? If they are naturally there, why are you worried that they're going to outdo you, outshine you, outperform you, and not be under as they should? Feminist protest and rebellion, as you know, is not new. There's a famous letter, I'm sure many of you have read, written in 1776, a letter to her famous husband, John Adams, written by Abigail Adams, who urged that the laws of the new nation shall, quote, remember the ladies and not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. Why then not put it out of the power of the vicious and the lawless to use us with cruelty and indignity? And she's using some pretty strong terms here about male-female relations. She's talking about the vicious and the lawless to use us with cruelty and indignity. She's alluding to some very real things that are happening, forms of abuse and the like, in a manner that's, by the way, reminiscent of all privileged individuals. And I saw this, I mean, if you're talking about serfs, you're talking about Aristotle, you're talking about the Greek patriarchal ruling class, you talk about the industrial bosses, the capitalists, whatever else. In all cases, they have the same trait, and John Adams did the same thing. He responded by using a technique that is very, very common. You'll see it all through history. He simply reversed the roles of victim and victimizer. And he wrote back to Abigail as follows. As to your extraordinary code of laws, I cannot but laugh. We men have only the name of masters, and will not give up this, which would completely subject us to the despotism of the petticoat. You see, he is suffering from the despotism of the petticoat. So they consciously know where their interests lie. In the 19th century, political leaders, educators, and clergy thought females were creatures of emotion and innately unqualified to vote. You remember, women struggled for the vote, and in our pluralistic, open, flexible, evolving system, they had to struggle for a mere 100 years, and they got the vote, just like that. I mean, just got up there, and it took only 100 years of getting beaten and jailed and force-fed in prisons and all that, and then they got the vote. So what are you complaining about? Okay. Women really weren't qualified for the vote, and this was a big issue in the 19th century, all through. I mean, the incredible outpouring of literature about why women couldn't vote. They were too emotional. They were physically infirm. Speaking for many males of his day, one minister referred to, quote, the logical infirmity of mind which constitutes one of the weaknesses, and I might also say one of the charms of the feminine constitution, unquote. It was said that women voters would forfeit their right to chivalry's protections if they voted. They could best inspire their men toward the virtuous life by remaining above politics rather than wallowing in it, you see. That they were very moral, and being moral, they would not be able to learn the arts of compromise and moderation. That's an interesting point there. Suffrage also would cause them to forego marriage and motherhood and succumb to the temptations of free love and socialism. Oh, I wish it were true about socialism. Furthermore, this is probably the most common prognosis. The turbulence of political life would be too taxing on a woman's delicate nature and health. And in considering the frailty of women, of course, these anti-suffragists had to overlook the many, many working-class women who stood from dawn to dusk, toiling at factory looms 10, 12 hours a day. They overlooked the women who put in endless days at stoop labor picking crops in a hot field, or the women who worked 70-hour weeks sewing garments in fire-trap sweatshops. And by the way, subsequent events demonstrated that even the most fragile, the most delicate of the upper middle class ladies proved hardy enough to withstand the rigors of walking into a polling booth and casting a ballot. They were able to do it without one recorded instance of any one of them fainting. The mode of gender oppression often varies according to class and race. Some bourgeois feminists are indifferent or overtly hostile to the recognition of class differences and class conflict. The same Abigail Adams, who so rightly argued women's cause, expressed an unlimited hostility toward the farmers of Western Massachusetts, who, when they were facing ruinous taxes, foreclosures, all sorts of oppressions, being thrown into debtor's prison and the like, they took up arms, an armed rebellion in America in 1787 known as Shays' Rebellion. And in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, Abigail Adams denounced Shays' Rebellion, quote, "Ignorant, restless desperadoes without conscience or principles have led a deluded multitude to follow their standard under pretense of grievances which have no existence but in their imaginations." Talking about the poor, women, and men who challenge her class interests, she sounds like John Adams talking to her when she argues for women's rights. Continuing, some of them were crying out for a paper currency, some for an equal distribution of property, unquote. She went on to call for, quote, "the most vigorous measures to quell and suppress these mobbish insurgents who dared to rebel against the propertied class." I'm sorry, these mobbish insurgents, unquote. I then added, who dared to rebel against the property class, and who dared, in her words, who dared to argue for, her words, an equal distribution of property, which I said a minute ago. Now that was her position, not because she was a woman, because there were women actively involved in Shays' Rebellion. There were women, farmers' wives, who were out there, loading the muskets and fighting and standing in front of the courthouses and opposing the debtor's prison. There were women in that fight too. She opposed that because of her class. Similarly, the French novelist George Sand, who defied 19th century conventions, she smoked little cigars and she wore men's clothes, and she demanded equality for women. But she denounced the revolutionary women and men of the Paris Commune, and the women played a very prominent role in the Paris Commune. Les incendiaries, they were out there causing the fires and all that right out on the battlefront. She denounced them, those who fought against the class privilege she herself enjoyed. Quote, "The mob is composed in part of dupes and fools, in part of the most degraded and criminal elements of the population. Nothing but a lot of coarse clowns." That's a terribly insensitive way to talk about people who are fighting, putting their lives on the line because of oppressive economic conditions. So when push came to shove, the otherwise iconoclastic Georges Sand showed her bourgeois colors and her class bigotry, demonstrating once again that wearing pants is no guarantee of wisdom or fairness. In 1908, the labor militant Clara Zetkin sharply criticized, quote, "a great and very influential portion of the English women's writers who oppose the legal protection of female labor." Anne Sullivan, the teacher of the famous Helen Keller, criticized the Boston Brahmin women who advocated female suffrage and abolitionism, and yet they treated their Irish servant girls like dirt. Mother Jones repeatedly made the same argument about the same particular stratum of women. Which doesn't mean that their fight for equal rights within their particular class boundaries was not a legitimate fight and an important democratic gain. I don't want to make that point.
I'm invincible, so are you. We do all the things they say we can't do. We walk around in the middle of the night. When it's too far to walk, we just hitch a ride.